just because not everyone can make it at this time. And so it'll be posted on the Huddle website. We're going to ask people to mute yourselves if you're not speaking, so we're not going to get that interference. If we do hear background noise, we'll go ahead and mute you, so don't be offended. The ground rules for every session are we have two. Only one person talks at a time, so just be respectful of one another. And the second one is if discussion associated with a specific topic goes beyond a reasonable time, I'll just give a warning signal, and you'll have about 10 minutes to wrap up your comments. That rarely happens. So let me go ahead and introduce our speaker. Dr. Brasu is a registered dietitian.
You can
She's
go
an
with my first name if it's easier.
I guess that means that I'm not pronouncing it correctly. All right. She's an
I
associate professor, no, it's good, and associate director of the School of Human Nutrition at McGill University. Her research program builds on patients' experience and needs. It was informed by patient partners with whom she works closely. It aims to understand the patient experience with diabetes self-management, inform on diet and eating behaviors in the type 1 community in the context of contemporary diabetes therapies. And three, explore strategies for timely access to diabetes education and support in both adolescents and adults. She co-leads the Better Project, which we had sent everyone a flyer on. And if you want to know more information, this is the best time to ask. And that includes a national prospective registry of patients living with type 1 in Canada and online training platforms for type 1 diabetes self-management. So we're going to have Anne-Sophie start with a presentation, a brief presentation, and that's going to be followed by our question and answer period. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. I've seen some, I don't know a lot of people personally in BC with type 1 diabetes, but potentially Barb is one of the person I know in BC, so it's great to potentially see someone that I know. If it's the Barb that I know, she's a patient partner we've been working with in the Better Project for a couple of years now. So I'm going to share my screen, but I just want to say that I'm very, very happy to be here tonight. And actually, it's a bit later for me. In Montreal, it's already 9. So I'll share my screen. I've prepared a little presentation on disordered eating. So we will all start with a kind of a similar knowledge of what is disordered eating. And I will give you some insight from some Canadian studies. So as Dr. Tang was mentioning, I co-lead the Better Project, which is includes a prospective registry of people living with type 1 diabetes. So I'll show you some data out of the Better Registry. And my team and I have also conducted other studies. One is diabetes. We're still looking for children, actually adolescents, 12 to 17 in that study, but I will also show you some results of what we have learned from adults living with type 1 diabetes in Canada. So for my disclosure, I do not live with type 1 diabetes myself. However, I've been closely working with people that have lived experience. My son best friend lived with type 1 diabetes, and that's where my son realized and understood what I was doing in life when he in the morning when I was making his breakfast, he said, "Mama, my friend Charles, if he's not feeling well, we need to give him juice because he has diabetes. Mama, is that what you're doing?" And I said, like, "Oh, now you understand what is like the works of mommy." And that was great because being a researcher in the diabetes sphere was not something my kids could understand until they get this real experience. And so I really want to make sure that the work I do will help anyone living with type 1 diabetes. So as I was mentioning, I'm co-leading the Better Project. The Better Project is funded by CRHR, Breakthrough T1D, and I think I forgot to put Breakthrough T1D. Don't tell them. And we also receive, and I just want to mention some unrestricted funding from several companies, so pharma companies as well. And my research have been funded by other diabetes societies as well. And so the Better Project, for those who don't know, or those who know just a bit, it includes several things, but there's the registry, there's a series of online training platform to support people with their um, self self-management of diabetes. We have a biobank, but it's also a project we do with people living with type 1 diabetes for people living with type 1 diabetes. So we're trying to develop a sense of community. And so we have a lot of giving back activities. We have webinars, blogs. And so if you want to learn and continue learning about diabetes, you can follow us and we hope that we can support you in your journey. So, today we are talking about disordered eating, but so it's a bit different from eating disorder. And I just want to start with what is eating disorder, and just to remember that eating disorder is a mental disorder. It's a mental condition. It span from some more restrictive or behaviors, and we have everything related to anorexia nervosa, bulimia, and it goes all the way to the other side where some eating disorders are really more around disinhibition, and so that's where you have binge eating and so on. And so there's a lot of behaviors associated with eating disorders, and when we are talking about disordered eating, we are talking about symptoms and behavior that are similar to what you see in eating disorders, but at a lesser frequency or a lower severity than what you would have to have a diagnostic of a eating disorder. And so when we talk about behaviors, disordered eating behaviors, we talk about potentially frequent dieting, some anxiety associated with specific foods or meal skipping, fasting or purging to make up for bad foods that you consider for food that you consider bad foods, chronic weight fluctuation, some rigid rituals surrounding food and exercise, feeling of guilt, shame associated with eating, feeling of loss of control around food, including compulsive eating. And so again, this goes from a spectrum into what is normal eating all the way through eating disorder. And so again, you'll see some behavior that are more associated with restriction, and you have others that are more associated with uncontrolled or unrestrained behavior. So the loss of control would be on that side, but on the other side, we have some like trying not to eat. Obsession with healthy eating could also be a disordered eating behavior. Some compensatory behaviors. In the case of type 1 diabetes, we talk about insulin omission. And when we get to more unrestrained eating, it's often coming also with some emotion, and you feel that you cannot control what you're eating anymore. Um, so why are we talking about this? And I think it's important that we acknowledge all together that type 1 diabetes is a condition that may lead to all those preoccupations. And I'm not going to surprise you, but the fact that that you need to have you need to focus on what you're eating at every meals to do your insulin injection, calculating carbs. Sometimes you'll see that the impact of your blood glucose when you're eating, if there's protein, if there's fat in the meal, the carbs are not acting the same. There's a lot of focus on what you're eating. You get a lot of training. You're told that you should, at the beginning, usually we tell you that you need to be precise, you need to weigh everything. All of this give a lot of focus on foods. There's other times as well that can trigger some disordered eating. If you have a low blood sugar, uh, it's a physiological reaction that you will want to eat more. And so in the case of hypoglycemia, sometimes it's really hard to know exactly what to eat, and you feel that you don't have this control anymore about what you're eating. And so this could also be a situation that leads to more risk of disordered eating. The fact that before a diagnosis of diabetes, there's often some weight loss. Your body is not absorbing all the energy from the foods because you don't have insulin in circulation. So sometimes people get some comments before their diagnosis about, oh, you've lose weight. It looks good. We know that we don't always want to hear this from others. But then when you start having you start retaking insulin, you're starting to reuse the right energy, the energy coming from the food. And so the weight gain that can go with the insulin injection is also a situation that can kind of trigger some disordered eating behaviors. And so type 1 diabetes is a condition that has a lot of like everything related to the management are all triggers of potential disordered eating. And so I wanted to bring the cognitive dietary restraint into the equation just to make you realize that. So sometimes what's happening is that your brain is trying to take over everything, the meal planning, putting some food rules, the weight monitoring. And so it will be a conscious attempt to restrict the food intake rather than following what are the signals of hunger of society. What is such little now I'm a fullness. You are going to help me here. So
Society.
thank you. And so it's really hard to eat intuitively when you have diabetes because there's so much you need to be thinking about. Diabetes self-management is 24/7. There's so many decisions you need to take in a day. And so everything, all the decision you need to take may kind of amplify the fact that you will put some restriction there. And so in the better register, I was telling you that I'm going to show you a bit of number and maybe you'll see if you are similar or different to others. We do have this one question about have you ever intentionally omitted insulin to lose weight? And this goes back to what I was saying when you start before you at the diagnosis, before you start taking insulin, often you lose weight because you don't have this insulin that helps to bring the energy into your cells. And so some people can use insulin as a compensatory behavior. And this is something that is specific. That's kind of a specific behavior to type 1 diabetes. And we don't necessarily have good data on this. And so this is a one question. So we are not digging into who's doing it right now or not, but we did ask. And so if you're curious to know in the Canadian population, what we found is that it was approximately 8% of 1,200 people that had answered that question when we did this analysis that have mentioned having omitted insulin to lose weight. They're not necessarily currently doing it, but they did it at some point. We did it. We only use the data from the adult participant in the Better Registry for this analysis. And what we saw, which is similar to what we already knew, is that gender. So if you self-identified as a woman, you have increased risk of having tried to limit your insulin to lose weight at some point in the past. And also if you were younger at the age of diagnosis. So those two criteria are predictors of who may omit insulin at some point. And so for the clinician, and whenever I'm giving a talk, I'm trying to say, if you have someone that was diagnosed during adolescence and so on, they may have had omitted insulin in the past, and they may still continue to do it. And what we also see is that people that have had omitted insulin at some point in life are also at increased risk of diabetes distress right now, or at weight cycling, having had more weight cycling, so losing and regaining weight. So those are factors that are associated with insulin omission to lose weight. And this is regardless of the BMI. So you people that with smaller BMI, higher BMI, anyone may have used this strategy at some point. And I think it's important that we remind ourselves that this is something that anyone can be facing. So this is what we learned from the Canadian context. We also did a bit of a scoping review because we were curious to know what is the literature, what have been the research looking at automated insulin delivery and nutrition and disordered eating. And so we did a bit of a scoping review that was published about 2 years ago. And what we saw, oops, sorry, at that point, there was only 7 studies that have looked at how automated insulin delivery, so those pumps that speak to CGM. So when you have a continuous glucose monitor speaking to your pump adjusts by itself. And so there's been a bit of qualitative studies. So people that were interviewed, and what they would say in those interviews is that they say that their new insulin pump will influence their eating behaviors, their dietary patterns. There's been a bit of studies showing more different types of fat being consumed, and seeing like differences in how people eat, and changes in carb content. But one thing that they would most of them would say is that it may reduce their food management burden due to the perception that those insulin pumps can correct for the carb content inaccuracy. So there's the people that started AID were thinking that potentially there's less mental burden around food choices if you are using this type of insulin pump. Um, and so almost all the studies showed that people with type 1 diabetes who switched to AID worry less about carb counting and include foods that they would normally avoid. Um, One additional thing that they would say, and just before I move here, was that some of them were also worried that they would lose their ability to do some carb counting, and so there was other stressful thoughts related to that. But overall, there seems to be less pressure with automated insulin delivery. And so the idea of the diabetes study was really to look at how AID system, those insulin pumps, may change eating behaviors in people with type 1 diabetes. And so we had recruited 130 adults living with type 1 diabetes in Canada. And we had given them a screening questionnaire for disordered eating. And so I was mentioning about intentional insulin omission before. Now we're talking about disordered eating in general. And what we see is that about 1% out of 3 scored at risk of disordered eating. So if you feel or you think that you may have some disordered eating behaviors, you're not alone, because this is very frequent in type 1 diabetes. Um, if you and I think we can talk about that after, but if you need some help, then seeing some healthcare providers that kind of understand disordered eating may be helpful. Talking with a dietitian, there's some strategies we can try to put in place to help someone with disordered eating behaviors, because in the end, what we don't want is, if this behavior is too severe, frequent, that we will lead to any like physical risk, nutritional deficiencies. There's some psychological, emotional burden associated with it. Like there could be consequences that will disrupt your daily living. And so it's not something that is infrequent, but it's something that is not that we don't say a lot, that we don't talk about it a lot. In this study, when we were recruiting, you can see that there's a bit more people that said that they had used intentional insulin omission for weight loss. It's about 13%, so a bit more than in the big registry that was not at all like not focused specific on this. And what we realize is that this 1/3 of people that scored at risk of disordered eating, the proportion are the same, rather if you use the AID system or not. So we may feel that the AID will change the disordered eating behaviors that we may have, but we are not seeing it. The behaviors are a bit different, but other things kind of come up when you feel that you have less restriction with the food choices. And so we have very limited evidence to suggest that that non-AID user will have more restrained eating or disordered eating compared to AID user. So is it really going to change something, or is just moving things around because you still live with this condition, you still take insulin, you still have lows, you still have a lot of factors that can trigger those behaviors. So I don't think it's an easy fix for this. What we realize that AID user may engage more in emotional eating, what they would not necessarily allow themselves to do before, because that would be related to the more diet flexibility that they have. And so dietitian uh, can definitely take a new role in the context of those new technologies. And we did a little, we did some interviews with dietitian, and they also mentioned that the way they approach nutrition with their patient have changed. Less focus on carb counting precision, less strict about the less strict counseling has improved their relationship with their patient because they feel less that you should do this, which we shouldn't be saying, but we often do, and they can now shift their counseling to other thing and really like building this healthy relationship with food, talking about meal timing strategies and other thing. And so while it's not an easy fix, I think dietitian needs to adapt, and hopefully you'll see that if you have the opportunity to meet with a dietitian. And so I'm always when I'm talking with dietitian and other healthcare providers, I always say that we should have disordered eating informed care. We should acknowledge the disproportionate risk of disordered eating in people living with type 1. And this is what I wanted to kind of tell you with this little presentation. So we should use a language that is non-judgmental, and we should be like dietitian and other healthcare providers need to be conscious about the way we discuss weight and food with people with type 1 diabetes, because you have all those triggers related to the condition, and consider focus on health outcomes that are not centered around weight loss, because a lot of those disordered eating behaviors are often associated with body shapes and weights. Um, and I'm just going to, I'm giving you the link to the support, the Type 1 support platform, not necessarily for you, but this is a platform for training someone about diabetes self-management. And we have this platform not only for people living with Type 1, but also for healthcare providers. And so if you ever meet therapists, psychologists that don't know that much about type 1 diabetes, they can self-learn if they create an account. And so you can tell them that there are resources to better understand what is type 1 diabetes. And so I thought that it could be useful for you to have this tool about explaining what is type 1 diabetes. And if you ever know any adolescents interested in that would be interested in doing some research and helping us understand a bit more the context of eating disorders, disordered eating behaviors, and type 1 diabetes. We're still recruiting, so I'm just showing it here, but that's not the point of this presentation. So I'll close it here and I'll stop sharing as it stopped.
Yes, I stopped
Yes,
sharing. All right, thank
good.
you for such an informative presentation.
It was a bit long.
Oh,
Sorry.
sorry. No, no, it's okay. No, more education is always good. So I'm going to go ahead and start the Q&A session. What I'm going to do is I'll read the question and then you can answer, and then I'll invite whoever asked the question to follow up if they would like. All right, so first question is, can eating to prevent lows while exercising lead to disordered eating habits? If so, what do you suggest if turning your pump down before exercising doesn't work as well?
Lows and physical activity is something very common. It doesn't necessarily mean and that it will be a disordered eating behavior that you're having those lows, but it's just that having lows may trigger cues of eating more. And so for sure, preventing lows is one strategy to to not experience this behavior. And so for exercise, there's different strategies we can use. Rather it's with adjusting the pump, reducing the bolus at the meal before. Sometimes it's snacking that needs to be considered, thinking about what is the best level of glucose level before exercising, not to go low. Depending of the type of exercise, it changes. I think, Trisha, you'll have to invite someone to come and talk about how to prevent hypoglycemia when you exercise, because those are lows that we can prevent. Sometimes it's about the timing of exercising in the day. If you do it in the morning rather than in the afternoon, before meal rather than after. Before meal, you have less insulin in circulation. So less insulin in circulation means less risk of having hypoglycemia. So there's different things that you can try. I love this question because that's what brought me into research 20 years ago, the lows during exercise. So I don't know if you need more suggestion about this, but happy to give more.
Okay, the person who submitted that question, would you like to follow up? All right, question number two. I feel like once I was on fast-acting insulin and carb counting that I've been using it as an excuse to eat whatever and however much I want. How do I stop this?
Um, How do you stop this? Before trying to stop this, I think you should think about why you think this is an excuse. Like, are you eating because you're hungry or not? Like, is it really an excuse or not? Are you stressed? Is there other emotions that you're feeling? And if you feel that yes, you're really allowing yourself and it's disruptive, then there's some strategies you can try to put in place, and you can go one after the other, depending on who you are. And I'm not going to give you like personal counseling today, but sometimes it's just to have more structures around meals, making sure that you eat at a regular time, that you don't skip meals. Sometimes it's about having eating something in the hour after you wake up. Like there's different things that you can do to not necessarily to kind of put some structure around mealtime, balance plates, pre-deciding what you'll be eating. So it's not on the spot the decision. You already have some kind of a schedule that you're following. Those are all little things that we usually recommend to kind of organize what your meals a bit more, have a bit more structure.
Okay, the person who asked that question, would you like to follow up?
Sure. So, hi. Uh, I'd asked this question because I had a very strict like I was diagnosed very young in elementary school, and so there was a very strict diet in place, and so I felt left out of a lot of things because being with other school age children and my siblings and having different things from them all the time. And so it was never really well taken care of until I got older. And then so I felt once I was introduced to
The carb
fast
counting.
acting, the carb counting and the fast acting insulin, and I almost felt like this sense of freedom. So I almost feel like I went the other way and just would eat and be a little
And
bit later, like, you know what? I'm just gonna add a
I
little bit
and
more.
and
Let me take more insulin.
and you know what? I think this is what's happening right now a bit with the AID and people feeling that they can eat what they couldn't eat before. You were so restricted before, then when you started this, it kind of opened on now I can eat whatever I want and I just give myself a bit more insulin and then I can each month more.
Yes.
And so this is where re-allowing a bit of structure around meals time can help, but not to be restrictive on I'm not eating this or that or that. It's more about like planning, scheduling a bit more what you're having, so you still have no restriction on the type of food you're having, but it's just pre thinking about quantities and so on. And sometimes more if you kind of feel impulsive about eating something, you can try to kind of wait and ask yourself, do I really want to eat that? Or maybe I should wait 10, 15 minutes and re-ask myself. And if I still want to eat it, then go for it. It means that potentially you have some physical cues that also like trigger some needs for eating. But it's
Okay.
kind of not being restrictive on what you're eating, but trying to help yourself with a bit more planning.
Okay.
I don't know if it will help, but that could help.
Okay. Thank you.
Great to hear from you, Shar. I can recognize your voice and, the spelling of
Oh,
your
you're
name.
good.
All right, next question. I'm curious what resources might be available for someone dealing with type 1 and ARFID in British Columbia. I'm not sure if you can answer this, Dr.
Oh,
Brasco. I should clarify that I tried my local ED clinic with little success. They were very kind, but I don't believe they had the depth of knowledge necessary to help me.
I don't know exactly what resources you have in British Columbia. For disordered eating, there's some national, NIDIC is one national association that have a lot of resources and training and maybe they could redirect you to some people that have the appropriate training. So NEDIC is the National Diabetic Eating Disorder Association, I believe. And I think Breakthrough T1D also have a list of potential people that could help. I don't know how, like, where physically they are located, but I think on those websites you can find information. Um, Honestly, I'm not in BC, a bit hard to tell.
Okay. You know what, Lana, could you go ahead in the chat box, put in the directory web address for the mental health and diabetes directory? This is from Breakthrough Type 1. So you
Yeah.
can just on your drop-down menu, pick BC, and it'll show all the psychologists and clinical counselors in BC. And sometimes they actually, indicate whether they specialize in eating. But
Yeah.
I do want to say that there is a dietitian who is a huddler, Katie Bartel. She's not a psychologist, but she is a dietitian and she has type 1. She has her own private practice. So if you're interested, please go to the website, the Huddle website, because she's on there. Um, it's worth just reaching out.
Yeah.
All right.
And we have done a couple of training session with NEDIC and Breakthrough T1D in the past to try to make both psychologists but also diabetes educator aware of disordered eating. So I hope it has changed a bit their understanding of this, but they are not necessarily specialized. I think that we still have a lot to do so people recognize this that is you are more affected than others with disordered eating, and that type 1 diabetes, if you say that you're omitting insulin, you cannot stop taking insulin. And so I know that a patient at some point was referred to a psychologist in eating disorder, and the person just said like, stop taking your insulin, which was catastrophic. So we want to make sure that you get the help from someone who knows.
Oops, I think I lost my, sorry, I think I lost my earphones, but I'm going to try to do this old school. All right, next question. I'm adamant about weighing and measuring my food to try to maintain optimal blood glucose. It feels pretty obsessive and exhausting, but too scary to imagine the potential outcomes otherwise. Is this considered disordered eating?
It could. It could if you feel that it impacts how you eat. If potentially you eat less socially, you avoid eating with people, it could be some disordered eating. And then the other question is, do we need to be that precise and weigh everything? And how can we kind of heal our relationship with this? I would say that, and just a bit like Char was saying a bit earlier, we've been very strict at the beginning. You will get a lot of education. People will tell you to calculate the carbs, subtract the fibers, and but you know what? When you're reading a food label, the food label is not that precise. So I don't want to kind of disrupt what you think about food labels, but they are allowed a good margin of error. And so as much as you want to be precise, the information you have about the content of food is not that precise. So give yourself a break.
Did the person who asked that question want to follow up? Okay, next question. How do I manage eating while focusing on a protein priority diet? Does the order in which I eat my food matter as someone with type 1?
Um, some people will say it does, and some research also kind of say that it does. But again, we don't want to put too much rules around what you're eating. So often there have been one or two studies showing that if you start with proteins first and then finish up with like carbs and free sugar at the end, the blood glucose will spike less. But you know what? What is most important is that you inject your insulin 10 to 15 minutes before you start eating. This will have much more of an impact than the order of the nutrients you're having in your meal. So yes, it's good to focus on proteins. It's good to have proteins in your meals. Proteins is helpful. It's helpful for fullness. It's helpful to help have less elevated glucose spike after a meal. But again, you can try different things. And one thing is if you can remember to inject before the meal, that will help you much more with the glucose after.
Okay, I have someone Leanne, who wanted to follow up on our other question, which I had forgotten to ask. So, Leanne, did you want to ask? I'm rewinding, essentially. Is she there? Leanne? Okay. Kayla, did you have a question?
Oh, no, I'll lower my hand. I was just popping in case you didn't see that Leanne had mentioned that in the chat.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry.
I
Going
haven't
back
seen the
now.
chat, but is the question directly in the chat? If I
No, no,
can answer, I'll do
she
it.
just said she didn't have a chance to follow up on the question. So I wanted to,
Uh,
oh,
she
and she can't turn on her microphone. Well, as soon as you can turn on your microphone, Leanne, go ahead and put that in the chat box, or you can just put your question in the chat box if you like. All right. In the meantime, there was a third question to this question. What's the best food to curb appetite?
I would say food that has fiber and proteins are quite good for helping with appetite and having those hunger after a meal. So just eating balanced plate will always help you. We never want to have only one type of food over the others. So making sure that you have proteins, you have fibers, um, like depending on what you like, but like Greek yogurts might be a good treat for someone who wants to feel full for a longer period of time than other types of yogurt because there's a bit more protein in it, so it may help for a longer period of time.
Okay, and the person who submitted those questions, would you like to follow up? All right.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you, Leanne. Sorry about
Okay,
that. I
this
didn't
is
mean to
Leanne.
skip over you.
No, not at all. Sorry about my technical problems here. So I'm following up on the question about avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. So I have sorry, let me just, I have the aversive kind. So with this disorder, you don't care about the size of your body. That is not a thing at all, right?
Nope.
Or it isn't for a lot of people with that situation going on. I shouldn't generalize. Anyway, so for me, that's not the case. So I went to an eating disorder clinic and they were obsessed with getting weight from me. And I was like, oh, I don't even own a scale. Like I literally don't even own a scale. I haven't weighed myself in 10 years. I have no idea what I weigh. So every appointment they're like, get us a weight, get us a weight. As soon as I got them a weight, they let me go as a client because I have a normal BMI, but I have nutrient deficiencies that show up on blood work and have caused me problems over the years. So, I mean, how do you kind of teach your eating disorder clinic, or how do you connect them with the idea that not everyone who has an eating disorder is obsessed with being small?
That's surprising that a disordered eating clinic kind of don't realize that. This is something I teach to my students, that not everything is related to weight.
Hmm.
So how do we teach them? I'm not sure. However, I would say it's not necessarily your role to teach them,
Right.
and but I don't know, but it's okay to make them realize that they are not helping you, and so ask your question and ask about what can they do for your nutritional deficiencies, because that's what I was saying a bit before. There could be real consequences of disordered eating, and so I would ask them questions, like specific questions. If you feel that they are not guiding you, you have the right to also ask what kind of information you need and seek for help. And if you
Well, I guess,
and this is also question you can ask before when you're we're never forced to work with one specific healthcare providers, and we can ask some questions. And so you can always ask questions before starting an appointment and selecting the person you'll be working with. So I would say
yeah, so
ask
I
them and
did
ask them what they can do for you.
I
Because
did
the
try
way
that.
you're eating and everything you're saying right now, you're showing that there's real consequences. You need help, and they should be there for to help you.
Yeah, I did screen them beforehand and ask them if they were familiar with RFID, and they said yes. And then throughout,
Hmm.
we had 6 or 7 meetings, and they seemed to indicate multiple times that they didn't actually have any expertise. And for reference, I'm in a very small town in the interior of British Columbia.
So there's
So
not a lot
I
of options, right?
so I'm definitely never going back to that clinic because it was very depressing and very isolating. and terribly
Mm.
upsetting. And there's just no way, right, that I would go back to that
Is
time.
there some virtual option in BC? I don't know. I
I
don't
don't
know
know.
specifically your resources out there. So,
No, a lot
um,
of the problem is because my body mass index is normal. Everyone's like, well, you must be fine. But then they look at my blood work and they're like, oh, you're not fine. I'm like, I
yeah.
know. Because I only eat like 18 foods, right? That's it. I will not
Hmm.
eat other food. It's um, I don't know. It's very hard because I've tried to get referrals to the coast and they say, no, you have to get treated in your health authority.
Mm.
And then they'll say, well, you should be under 18 or, I kind of gave up because so I've just carried on with the same level of eating disorder for 15 years. And
So, Leanne, how about you and I connect after this? And so I
let's
think
do
we
it.
can try to
Let's do it.
problem solve. And it's great to hear you. I haven't heard your voice in years, I feel like.
You
So
sound
yeah, let's
great
connect
too.
and then we can figure out
Do
because
other
there's a
things.
eating disorder clinic
Yes.
in St. Paul's that I definitely will have connections to. So let's do that.
Yeah, you will. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
No worries. All right, next question. How do you manage binge eating, especially when it comes to low blood sugars and late night binge eating cravings related or unrelated to low blood sugars?
Um, so, so yes, lows can lead to binge eating. You need to remember that when you're getting low, you have all those hormones that will do anything to make you eat. So it's not abnormal to have the feeling that you need to binge after a low. Um, so I just want to kind of tell you that it's kind of your body that tells you to eat. It's not because you're abnormal. So again, it we can talk about like preparation, planning for it. One thing is it's sometimes we feel that we need to binge because you're not getting out of the lows like fast enough. So you may have learned the 15 grams, 15 minutes. We did some studies not that long ago testing this, and the amount of minutes it takes to get back to a normal blood glucose level after having taken 16 grams of carb or four dex 4, it's 23 minutes. So don't be surprised if you don't get out of your low that fast. So maybe if you feel that like you often tend to want to binge after, maybe start right away with not 15, but with 25. It's not that 10 extra gram of carbs that will make a huge difference on the amount of energy that you're taking, but it may help to kind of shut down a bit the noise of your body wanted to eat that much. Uh, of course, prevention of lows is what would work best, and what we've seen, and with everyone that has a CGM and can use trends arrows and so on, what we saw is that if you treat your low at 4.5 with the 15 grams of carbs, the proportion of people that really have a low taking 15 grams when you're at 4.5 is really, really smaller than if you wait to be at 4 to treat your low. So there's prevention of lows. That is something that you can do. It's also understanding that it may take more than 15 grams to correct an hypoglycemia. So if you have tendency to binge when you are low, maybe start already with a bit more of carbs. It's also planning. It's having your low rescue kit that has already pre-portioned amount of carbs. The fast-acting sugar, we are talking about like Dex4 or maybe it's juices for you, but something that you already have preset, so you're not running and rushing for food when you're getting in low. So it again a bit about like um, structuring your potential lows, and lows are not infrequent. So you will experience some. For the night, sometimes you feel you will go into hypoglycemia because you have done exercise in the day. So there are some strategies you can do if you exercise during the day to limit the risk of hypoglycemia overnight. The problem with hypoglycemia overnight is that you don't feel them until you get to a certain level. AID helps with that. We've seen great improvement in glucose levels overnight if you have those insulin pumps that glucose sensor talks to. But if you don't, there's some strategy to reduce the amount of long-acting insulin that can be put in place. Also looking at, do you really need to bolus for snacking in the evening? There's different things that can be put in place. What we also want to realize is, did I eat enough during the day before that my body don't feel that they need energy overnight? So making sure that you have balanced meals throughout the day, that you eat sufficiently during the day can also help with the nights. I'm not sure I've covered everything, but happy to answer more if the person has still some questions.
Yes, did the person who submitted that like to follow up? Okay, next. Recently I met a person with type 1 who swears by sugar-free liquid IV. I've never heard of it. Do you know anything about
Me,
this
me
drink?
either. I don't know that drink. I
Oh,
should have
okay.
checked at all the questions before. I don't know this drink.
Okay, no worries. I'll go to the next question. Do you think the diet advice given by type 1, given to type 1s by nurses and doctors encourages disordered eating behaviors, especially in youth with type 1?
I don't want to generalize again. Not everyone is giving the same advice. I would say that yes, there's some risk of not necessarily getting appropriate re suggestion and recommendation according to who you are, because what they will usually give you is kind of generic recommendation, and this is where, when if you have the opportunity to meet with the dietitian, the dietitian will try to give you recommendations that are tailored to your own needs and more personalized guidance. So yes, I think it could be some trigger if someone is really focused on carb counting and don't realize that we can allow some errors to carb counting without impacting that much our blood glucose levels or hypo risk or so on. So, but they needs to know you. They need to have the right questions. Generic recommendation may, yes, I believe, trigger some disordered eating.
Okay, like would the person who submitted that like to follow up? Okay.
Yeah, actually. I just wanted to ask, so like if, because I've never actually met with a dietitian. I've been a diabetic for 23 years. Never met with a dietitian. Maybe when I was a kid, but like it's been so long. So like how do I go about like advocating for myself with my my care team, because I've never actually had this conversation with anyone, and they definitely missed that I was like I showed like behaviors of like restrictive eating as a teenager, but no one ever caught it. So like how do you even go about that?
I think it's you need to express your need. You need to tell them that you need to see a dietitian, that you're worried that you're not eating all the nutrients you need to be eating. You need to kind of explain to them and ideally get a referral. I don't know if there's a dietitian in the team. I don't know. Um, I again, that's the problem of inviting someone from Quebec. I don't know enough from your system in BC and how you can reach out to meet with a dietitian, but I think it could help you, and also for diabetes team in general to just acknowledge and ask questions. Ask open question, no judgment, but like, how do you feel about eating and what you eat and how do you feel around mealtime? They should ask you that, and you should feel comfortable and free to answer and tell them your needs. I do hope you get to meet a dietitian. I think a dietitian can help you kind of just potentially personalize a bit the recommendation and to what are your specific needs.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to ask this last
Okay,
question.
I'll answer quickly.
Okay. Ever since being diagnosed with type 1 at the age of 40, I've had a very difficult time regulating alcohol use. It's a free treat for me as I don't have to calculate insulin, and so I have learned to cope with using it to the point of misuse. How do I find better ways to find freedom with treats while escaping my diabetes?
Yeah, maybe it has to be treats that are not related to alcohol consumption, which could be risky. Even if we say it's a free food that can lead to lows. So it's always a bit always a bit we need to be careful. So maybe it could be related, like you can find other ways that it's more like physical activity or thinking about other activities that make you comfortable and kind of forget about your diabetes for a while. Some activities that may not disrupt too much your blood glucose levels. I don't know what you like, and maybe this is what you need to ask yourself. What do I enjoy doing that can kind of give me this free ways of thoughts and that I don't focus that much on my diabetes.
Does the person who submitted that like to follow up? All right, I think we can do one last one. All
Okay.
right, this is a little long one though, but I'll talk fast. I exercise quite a lot each week, and because of many of my sessions are fairly intense, it's not unusual for me to go through an entire packet of sweets during a workout. At 24, this hasn't really noticeably affected my weight or health, but I'm conscious that this might unfortunately not always be the case. Looking ahead, I'd like to develop better habits, so do you have suggestions for what types of food to eat leading up to and during exercise to fuel up without relying so heavily on sweets?
Again, thinking about insulin adjustment, the timing of exercising in the day, making sure that depending on when is your last meal before, you can have a bit more proteins. If you're going closer to your exercise, then you do need to have carbs to help prevent the lows. Thinking about what's level of glucose you're starting the exercise with. There's a lot of strategies that you can put in place to manage glucose levels. IPO is often a risk when we exercise. I do acknowledge that.
Okay, does the person who submitted that question want to follow up? Okay, great. I want to be mindful of Dr. Bresso's time just because she's calling in from Montreal, and so it's kind of late. I know 9 o'clock is our bedtime. So thank you so much for coming here and sharing all this information as well as answering our questions. And perhaps at another huddle, we'll focus or we'll carve out more space for Q&A. But any of you who did have questions, please feel free to email them to me, and I will try to have maybe Dr. Bresso or someone else who is also equally knowledgeable to be able to answer those questions. So thank you so much, and we really
Thank you
appreciate
for
the
having
time
me.
you've taken.
Reinvite me if you want.
Oh yeah, well, I didn't want to, I didn't want to impose on you, but because you said this publicly, I might re-invite you then.
Yeah, I have
Um,
a couple of people that have heard that.
And I want to remind everyone next month, our huddle topic is automated insulin delivery, AIDs, and the person who is delivering that talk is Terry Curry, who is actually the BC expert on that. So really excited to have you all come back. Thank you and have a wonderful night.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for having me.